voter fraud is very real, and voter fraud doesn't have to be huge to be a problem. I mean, now I know we're talking about on the primary side, so that's why I think it illustrates the point well here. Even a small number of illegal ballots could be the difference in a Senate race, as we're seeing right now.
The All-Star game was pulled out of Atlanta because Major League Baseball bought into the idea that the new Georgia voting rights bill was Jim Crow 2.0. Well, the numbers are being destroyed in terms of early voters. And I want to play for you an audio list of all of the Democrats who said the Georgia bill was Jim Crow 2.0. They were all 1 billion% wrong. Of course, they haven't apologized, but listen to this.
I'm convinced that we'll be able to stop this because it is the most pernicious thing. This makes Jim Crow look like Jim Eagle. I mean, this is gigantic.
We are living through the worst assault on the right to vote since the Jim Crow era. And yesterday, on the Senate floor, white nationalists used the Jim Crow filibuster to block voting rights legislation.
Senate Republicans voted to aid and abet the most dangerous campaign of voter suppression since Jim Crow.
What we're seeing across the states today is nothing short of Jim Crow in the 21st century.
We are always going to push back against these sort of bigoted, racist Jim Crow 2.0 style voting laws.
Parts of our country are backsliding into the days of Jim Crow, passing laws that harken back to the era of poll taxes.
It's horrifying that you have any Democrat, Clay, saying this. I mean, it's just so dishonest and divisive and destructive. And yet, it's not just random Democrats. That was Joe Biden, the president of the United States, is saying this.
He traveled to Georgia to have a specific speech about this being Jim Crow 2.0.
And they are breaking records in Georgia for early voting. So somehow, these super evil and, it's so racist voting integrity laws the state of Georgia has passed are so effective at being racist and blocking minorities from voting that you have all-time high turnout already happening in early voting, all-time high minority turnout happening in early voting. It's almost like the Democrats are shameless liars who do not care that everything they said about this has already proven to be false.
The numbers are this. I'm reading directly from a graphic from the Georgia Secretary of State. Over 800,000 people have voted early in the state of Georgia in 2022. That compares to total voting that is out there in 2018 of under 400,000 voters. That was the last midterm early voting. So we have over doubled in terms of the state of Georgia what was done in 2018, and they have already pulled, which is pretty wild. They have already pulled these arguments are just vanishing, right?
In Georgia specifically, I wonder if the messaging, think about this, the messaging is going to be in the state of Georgia that Republicans are super racist, so they passed the super racist law, and the reality is you're having bigger turnout you've ever had, no voting is being suppressed, it is a total lie, and Republicans are also super excited to vote for Herschel Walker. So this is how racist in the state of Georgia the GOP is. They're passing laws that are good for voter integrity after there were some very real questions, to put it mildly, in the 2020 election. And one of the most exciting candidates in the GOP in the Senate race in the whole country is Herschel Walker. But we're going to get lectures about racism all the time from Democrats. At some point, it just doesn't work anymore. At some point, it falls on deaf ears, as it should.
And by the way, we've updated you and continued to update you on how tight the race has been in Pennsylvania between Dr. Oz and Dave McCormick. And by the way, the most recent numbers that I'm seeing there, it appears Dr. Oz is going to win. It's around 1,000 votes separating those two. I mean, it couldn't almost be any closer at all. We don't know exactly how many votes are still out there, but that margin has stayed somewhat around. I'm looking at it right now. I think it's a little bit over 1,000, like 1,060. at the most recent numbers that I'm seeing right now. But what I want to bring up is, in addition to what you're talking about with Herschel Walker, who I think is going to win in the state of Georgia and knock Reverend Raphael Warnock back to his pulpit. Look at the voting in the Republican primary. Democrats like to talk about how inclusive and diverse their candidates are, when really it's very often, look at who's running the Democrat Party right now. It's a bunch of old white people. It's Joe Biden, it's Chuck Schumer, and it's Nancy Pelosi. Look at what happened in the Republican primary. Dr. Oz looks like he's going to win a really close race. If he wins in Pennsylvania, he would be the first Muslim to ever be elected to the United States Senate, okay? Simultaneously, Kathy Barnett got just shy of 25% of the vote in Pennsylvania, black woman running for the nomination in the Republican primary. Now, I'm not saying people were voting for them because of their identities, because that's what Democrats claim to do, but these people are telling running such good campaigns and telling such compelling stories to the audience, the electorate, that in the Republican primary, I'm doing math live, right, Buck, which is always difficult, but right around 57% of Republican primary voters in Pennsylvania voted for a Muslim candidate or a black woman to represent them statewide in Pennsylvania. Does that, to you, Buck, sound like something that a super racist party would do?
Think about the recent stars that are emerging within the Republican Party. You have Winsome Sears and Mayorkas, along with Glenn Youngkin in Virginia. You have, as you said, Dr. Oz, who'd be the first Muslim American at that, to be elected to. Is it the first to the Senate? Is that really? I know.
I believe I'm correct. Somebody can let me know if I'm wrong in that. But my reading is that there's never been a Muslim senator before, and Dr. Oz would be the first.
And obviously, we've talked about Herschel Walker, and there are other candidates too. But the GOP view of all this is we just want the best people. We just want people that are going to represent the values that we share, and we want to bring as many folks in as we possibly can. And we fundamentally do not care about the identity politics of different politicians. We want people that are great, and it doesn't matter. We just want good people. I also would just say on the issue of Pennsylvania specifically, you think about all of the time that we're told, oh, there's not really any voting fraud. And then you say, well, what about this person who went to prison for voting fraud? And what about that person who went to... And I know there are a lot of people who have been asking and reaching out specifically about the Dinesh D'Souza movie. I've watched it. I've talked to Dinesh. I've interviewed Dinesh about this. Voter fraud is very real, and voter fraud doesn't have to be huge to be a problem. I mean, now I know we're talking about on the primary side, so that's why I think it illustrates the point well here. Even a small number of illegal ballots could be the difference in a Senate race, as we're seeing right now. And I think we're more allowed to talk about it because I'm not saying anyone's committing fraud in Pennsylvania. I'm just saying if you don't get it really as right as you can with what ballots should be counted, Clay, this race in the primary is probably going to come down to 500 votes, 1,000 votes.
Yeah.
I mean, think about the margins that we see in these contested states. That's why, for a place like Georgia, to try to have more accountability, to tighten things up, to have better surveillance if there are going to be drop boxes, etc., makes a whole heck of a lot of sense. Because you don't need 50,000 fake ballots to throw an election. You need 5,000 maybe.